Hello and most welcome to 1860 of the H series. We will continue with the article in the book Studies in the Book of Revelation, edited by Steve Moyise. The article's name is Does the Lion Lie Down with the Lamb? Last time we took a careful look into what makes something real, and we had an interesting discussion in the comment section that oppositions, contradictions are absolutely all important to have a clear meaning. And that, of course, goes against the grain of thinking that the only chance of having understanding is monosemic idea of the Saussurean take, or the Levi-Strauss idea of a grid pattern that covers all anthropology. This conquering of all possible possibilities, shutting down of alternatives. Here we have the superposition or the complementarity. Jesus is both the lamb and the lion, which makes the specific traits of being a lamb, that the singular lamb, if you like, become even stronger, even more pronounced. We know from quantum mechanics, in order for there to be a singular trait or a singular order, it needs to be multiple. It needs to be contradictory and multiple. Very important. That is how reality is made. That's the actual construct of reality making. Reality in action, you can call it. Because also from Wittgenstein we learn that there is a complementarity that from the very beginning can seem to be absurd. And that is that all action come with concepts. Without concepts there can be no words. There can be no understanding. No furthering of understanding. It will put an illicit stop to the understanding. As to make it less pertinent, less telling, less understandable. All those things will come from the lack of bringing in all parts, bringing in the action as well as the concept, making it most definitely broader. contradictions are beneficiary to us. They are not enemies to be dispelled or evicted. No, they are the true material of reality. Maybe modern man in his left hemispheric turn has forgotten that contradictions are the foundations of reality, that they're constantly mutually participating in everything. And we continue the read on page 190. The text is menacing, very small. Could we make it a little bit bigger, possibly? 220. I think 220 will do. 230 maybe. There we go. Thank you very much. The book opens with a vision of him coming with the clouds, and on his account all the tribes of the earth will wail. Wail.
No.
The description of him in 112 and 18 is awesome.
Awesome. Oh.
He receives from God power and wealth and wisdom and might. As he opens the seals, disasters come upon the earth, so that the inhabitants shrink from the wrath of the Lamb, or roar. Trumpets bring further disasters, so that a third of humankind was killed by the fire and smoke and sulfur.
Third. Oj, oj, oj.
Yes, indeed. In chapter 14, the Son of Man reaps the earth with a sickle, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle
Oj, oj, oj.
for a distance of about 200 miles.
Oj, oj, oj.
Under the symbol of Babylon,
Babylon.
God's enemies not only pay for their crimes, but receive double for her deeds,
Double for her deeds.
while those in heaven rejoice because the smoke goes up from her for ever and ever.
Rejoice. Smoke.
This may sound a less Christian reading, but it is difficult to conclude that it is a less coherent reading. It does make sense of much what we find in Revelation, and is how many people do read it until Christian commentators teach them otherwise. Is it then the desire to produce a Christian reading that is really the governing criterion. It is not surprising, or I should read the title, Christian or canonical readings. It is not surprising that Christian writers resist readings of Revelation that make God out to be a tyrant.
Tyrant.
Tough. Not many cite their Christian faith as a criterion of interpretation, but Brevard Childs uses the notion of canon to distinguish between multiple interpretations. Whatever the book may have meant to the author and the original readers, the most significant interpretive factor now is that it is part of the canon of Scripture. Though the history of how this came about is exceedingly complex and was never universal, the modern reader is unlikely to encounter Revelation as a single artifact, but as the last book of the Bible. Bible.
Bible.
And various studies have attempted to show that it is a fitting conclusion. For example, it abounds with images of paradise restored.
Paradise restored.
According to Bockham, it is the climax of prophecy. It is the answer to the psalmist's cry, "How long will the wicked prosper?" A canonical approach will use all this to show that loss of confidence in recovering authorial intention need not and should not lead to postmodern pluralism. Hoover pluralism.
Pluralis. Pluralis.
Child suggests that the issue of canon shows itself in three features of the book of Revelation. First, John's extensive use of Daniel shows how the author understood apocalyptic. It is to be reinterpreted in the light of Christology. I quote here Childs. God's decisive event in defeating the cosmological power of evil lies in the past. In the event of the cross, God's reign was forever established. And Satan defeated.
Hooray.
The apocalyptic imagery of Daniel now serves the function of identifying the defeated enemies of God and of the church, who act from an earthbound perspective as if they were still in control.
Control.
Control. Second, the opening and closing sections of the book show how it is to be received. In the epilogue, the warning not to add or subtract from the book shows its author laid claim to its being divine revelation at the outset. Wow, at the outset, at the Big Bang, maybe? And the voice of the prologue, which describes how the revelation given to Christ was transmitted to John, offers a canonical guideline by means of which the book was to function as authoritative scripture for generations long after the author. Third, the book soon became known as the revelation of John. Despite its opening words, which shows that it belongs with the other Johannine writings. Writings.
Right.
Writings.
Ratings.
Childs does not wish to make a historical point about authorship, but here simply to affirm that there is a larger canonical unity to the church scriptures, which is an important guideline to its correct theological understanding. For the last book of the Bible, such a canonical control is especially needful.
Needful. Control. Control is needful.
However, one might question the desirability of canonical control if it means conforming books like Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiastes, Job, and Revelation to more mainstream traditions. How is that doing justice to the sheer variety of material we find in the canon?
Canon. Canon.
Furthermore, how can Childs be so confident that he is offering a canonical reading of Revelation? Yeah,
Nice alliteration. Child's CCC.
it's perfect.
Mm.
Is it the only way that other material from the Bible can be related to Revelation? Could one not also link it with the destruction of Canaan and judgment oracles against the nation and claim that exclusion is a theme that runs right through the Bible? And should we be interpreting the Bible exclusively for the Christian community? Does no one else have a voice? Indeed, it might be said that this is enacting precisely the interpretation of Revelation, silencing outsiders, that it is actually seeking to counter, as Carey has demonstrated in this volume. Justice and judgment. A different option comes from Elisabeth Schüssler, Fiorenza. Schüssler, nice kiss. She interprets Revelation not from the standpoint of canonical consistency, but of justice and judgment.
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 You are hereby judged. She interprets Revelation not from the standpoint, I took that one. This is partly suggested by revelation itself, but is also a personal commitment.
Commitment.
All interpretation is ideological. History writing takes place by analogy. What an author thinks is the most likely to have happened, given his or her own understanding of how the world works. Literary readings depend on choosing certain aspects of a text to privilege, and canonical readings are explicitly ideological. The way forward, then, is not simply to argue the merits of one's particular interpretation, but to inform the reader as much as one can about one's own ideological commitments. What is appropriate in such a rhetorical paradigm of biblical scholarship is not detached value neutrality, but an explicit articulation of one's own rhetorical strategies, interested perspectives, ethical criteria, theoretical frameworks, religious presuppositions, and socio-political locations for critical public discussion.
Value neutrality. Hmm.
Interpretations of Revelation that encourage warmongering, imperialism, racism, or sexism are certainly possible, but are deemed unacceptable.
Hmm.
By their fruits you will know them, says Jesus. Any interpretation that leads to any of these ethical isms is unacceptable, whatever basis it may have in the text.
Ethical isms. Ethical isms.
Now for some, like Bloom and Pippin,
Pippin.
this is a criterion that revelation can not survive. Ah,
Why? Fair enough.
It is so riddled with the lurid and inhumane that the book itself must be judged unacceptable.
Yeah.
But for Schissler's Fiorenza, Revelation can be seen as a fitting response to the dehumanizing powers of Rome. John advocates an uncompromising theological stance because he and his followers view the dehumanizing powers of Rome and its allies as theologically so destructive and oppressive that a compromise with them would mean a denial of God's life giving and saving power.
Power. Power.
She does not think that every part of Revelation necessarily lives up to this, and so advocates an interpretive form of testing the spirits as interpreting subjects. Biblical readers must learn to claim the spiritual authority to assess both the oppressive as well as the liberating imagination of particular biblical texts and their interpretations.
Liberating. Liberating.
Interpretations.
Liberating.
The task of the interpreter is to read for justice and judgment, discerning its voices
Voices.
and amplifying them above the sound of more destructive ones. Interpretation is thus rooted both in the particular text and in the interpreter's social location. Indeed. And relates to the rhetorical purpose of the interpreter commentator, i.e., whose interests are being served by the publication. Indeed. I think I'm reluctant to start a whole new chapter here. Let's have a look, see how it works after that. No, I think I put a pause. So resumed, I put a pause here and we are just about to begin a multidimensional approach. The last word being the publication. And we do count number 1860. And we have 12:41 on the clock here.
Page 192, I think.
192, yes.
Indeed. 192.
92. A big 92. The text is extremely condensed here. I don't know what font this would consider to be. Let's go for some quotes. And I already found something on the previous page, if I don't misnomen here. Actually, even going to page 190.
Voilà.
And let me just read the first line after the subchapter title, Christian or Canonical Reading. If you go up a bit there. There. Exactly. Perfect. It is not surprising that Christian writers resist readings of Revelation that make God out to be a tyrant. I think once more coherence and consistency in another shape is coming up here. It should, so to speak, fit a pre-made pattern, a priori pattern for what the Bible should be. And God should not be a tyrant in those episodes. So copy, paste, edit. If we go further down, we've been talking here that the text mentions the canonical approach, and Childs is especially mentioned. And Childs' Christian canonical readings is a very nice alliteration, as Kalle pointed out. We have the CCC. There, yeah. A canonical approach, the end of that paragraph, the big one, will use all this to show that loss of confidence in recovering authorial intention need not and should not lead to postmodern pluralism. Why is that? It's a tricky one. But if you start with the absolutists, then in contrast, you will get this, without a surprise, pluralism of postmodern. I think a comparison here is apt between the Scylla and Charybdis of, on the one hand, the Scylla being scientism, materialism, reductionism, empiricism, and on the other side you have idealism, solipsism, and so forth. I think there is a match here perfectly. The Scylla and the Charybdis. The Charybdis is probably postmodern thought, and the Scylla is the absolute take. So you get that automatically by assuming or being in the absolute take. So without having an understanding that the words are participating in use and that they get their criterion of correctness from their use, which automatically without any further need for a sort of underlying a priori rule for what is true and what is consistent or coherent and whatever these models of rationality, prosthetics of rationality are using. So you have this, you make up your own private language thing that doesn't even work for yourself, and you say, I have rationality. But you have no criterion for that. The a priori rules are not with their feet, so to speak, in use. So they have very little meaning. They evade meaning by not participating. So yeah, I think I'll settle for that. The Charybdis is more or less postmodernism, relativism, and the other one is the absolutism of scientism, reductionism, or the idea of that rules governs what is rationale. Where those rules are situated, if not in use, they simply don't exist. They are like corpses, to make a revelation a term. They are like corpses of words.
We need more corpses. Corpses are good.
Yeah, definitely. We go further to justice and judgment. And here we have this lady with the funny name, Elisabeth Schüssler Fiorenza. And she wants to have consistency as well, as we can see in the subchapter on the third line, second line. She interprets Revelation not from the standpoint of canonical consistency, but of justice and judgment. This is partly suggested by Revelation itself, but is also a personal commitment. All interpretation is ideological, and I think that goes into the Charybdis of postmodern thinking. And what it really means, I don't know, but it's somewhere out there in the Charybdis. Should go to the Scylla. Scylla is actually also a very nice flower, but there is no connection, I think, etymologically. I hope not. Let's go to the next page, 192. And the third paragraph here, we have any interpretation that leads to any of these ethical isms is unacceptable, whatever basis it may have in the text. Well, that's putting an a priori. Of course, I agree that those things shouldn't be there, but you're still pressing the a priori of absolutism. Text, there's nothing we can do with the text. It has to speak for itself. And most probably, these antagonisms do help the text somehow. It doesn't mean that God is any of those things. You can only have goodness where you have evil. The contradictions are a necessity. I think this once more from Frau Schüssler's side is the search for coherence and consistency. The Cartesian make everything logical according to a private language rule of logic or sense. In the end, it will make little, if any, sense. It will be senseless. The left hemisphere, maybe. And but also, as Wittgenstein shows, there is an interesting connection here by what Julian Jaynes and Ian McGilchrist mentioned, and the discoveries of, or the pointing outs of Wittgenstein. Because once you have this binary choice, you have to choose between that or the other. You go into the left hemisphere. You are damned. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. It is a bit more of, have you stopped beating your wife? No matter how you answer, you are a bit cornered. So Wittgenstein can go to explain, because I think before you realize this, you don't have a choice. I didn't have a choice. I was deeply entrenched in the Charybdis of absolutism and logic and my own rules for what was rationale. And I think that sad way could lead to isolation, and you will not be understood by anyone, not even yourself, really. And I see I got a mail here, Kalle. Please come in.
So let me comment on whether God is tyrant. The short answer is yes, he is.
Ah!
Yes, because Revelation says that Jesus is a lion.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would only say he is a lamb. So he is a tyrant. Actually, those Christians who say that we need rules, preemptive rules, they are tyrants.
Ah, yeah.
Those who impose rules to reading, they are tyrants and not Jesus. Now, Jesus is a tyrant, but of another sort. And let me go down here. Let me also comment on this lady, Elisabeth Susle Fiorenza.
I
Very
like the
good
name.
your. Yes, so she says like this: dehumanizing powers of Rome. So it is a revelation is a reply to demonizing powers of Rome. But here Susle Fiorenza is already making a binary choice. That is only choosing one of two choices. That is, I would say, dehumanizing powers of Rome and Jerusalem. He has
Oh,
already preemptively chosen Rome is the bad guy in Book of Revelation.
yeah.
So I would compare Babylon is both Rome and Jerusalem, like
Yeah.
the lion and lamb. So you have both sides, or rabbit and duck, as Wittgenstein would say it. So we have many, and I have actually, let me conclude with an excellent, I think, in my opinion, excellent comparison I came up with now. So you mentioned these double binaries that most of us take.
Yeah.
They take one instead of two. And this made me think about the double slit experiment, which is
Oh,
that
yeah.
where you
Yeah.
have,
Yeah. You're in
where
the
you
cloud.
have, we could say, to simplify, you have there two lines coming. And let's say that most people would take the left one, and that line would symbolize the left side of the brain.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. Yeah.
And after the fact, after you're taking the left path, it seems that everything was already a priori. Everything was
Hmm.
already
Afterwards,
established.
everything looks like it was ordered in a particular way, that it has always meant to be that way, and there is no escape from that. Very good.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that in this metaphor of mine, you have both quantum physics, Michael Christ, and Derrida. That is, Derrida has pointed out that
Hmm.
we or always take only one opposition, one pole of one opposition. So it helped me to get this good metaphor, I think, to understand what is the double slit experiment really. It's about taking one path of two, and before you take one path of two, you are in superposition
You're in
of
superposition,
two
definitely.
or more alternatives,
Hmm.
like in the left or right side of brain.
Yeah.
You take then most of the people take left side of the path, so to say, and then they think, yes, this seems great, but is the superposition which is the ultimate,
It's it's the
ultimate.
superposition.
That is the position of power when we speak of power. You need both the lion and you need the lamb and you need both
Yeah,
Jerusalem
yeah,
and
yeah.
Rome.
Hooray. Yes.
Yes, yes.
I like your
God needs to
enthusiasm.
be a tyrant, and he's also non-tyrant. He's a lion
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and a lamb. Let's end
yeah.
it there.
It also goes in language because if you have the idea that there are rules in language which they are saying consistency, coherency, or the universal grammar of Chomsky, or what people usually think that are rules instead of use, you get to determinism in language. But as
Mm.
Wittgenstein says, the choice is absolutely free in every instance. And he's the only thinker that says that. And in that circumstance, because the quantum mechanical experiments are not repeatable, there are one times off, whereas all in the Newtonian seems to be repeatable. That's the big difference.
Okay, let's end there, and let me end this with a lamb-lion imitation if I can.
Okay, let's do it.
And then,
Very good. Thank you very much, Kalle, for participating. Thank you for your great comments, as always. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Have a very pleasant morning, day, night, or afternoon, wherever you are. Bye bye for now.